Welcome to Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change, the show that brings real conversations about fairness, compassion, and progress into our everyday lives. I'm Pooja Kothari, and each week I sit down with guests from all industries and backgrounds to talk about what equity looks like, not just in their work, but in their daily choices and personal journeys. Because building a more equitable world isn't just for academics, activists, or experts, it's for all of us. Every day, in big ways and small, we can choose to be more aware, more kind, and more connected. And this is where we learn how. Welcome, everybody, back to Everyday Equity. Today's guest is someone I've been looking forward to speaking to since last year. Swathi Parikh, founder of Greater Good Careers. She is a career and leadership coach for mission-driven professionals and lawyers. Swathi, it's so great to have you here. Before we get started, I was trying to remember how we met and how we got connected. And I know it was through LinkedIn, but was there any other connection?
I think we have a lot of mutual friends. So I had, admired your work and seen you speak. And so I think I had reached out and was just excited to talk to you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I love that. The community is so big, and it's so funny on LinkedIn, which is kind of like where the professionals kind of hang out on social media, but it actually has driven so many people. I've met so many people. I've made so many friendships and connections through it. So I know it's kind of like nerd alert. Here's LinkedIn, but I've met so many like similar minded people, like more so than I feel like any other place. So I feel like we go like, we've been talking for so long that I forgot like how we first met.
I think that's how we met, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I totally meet people on LinkedIn and find people. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and then I find people who are doing interesting things. And I was like, I talked to this person, let me reach out. And so I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I also took that note from you. And I also started reaching out to people, or whenever I connected with someone, I just thought, let's do more than just like be a number of like, adding to like the number of connections you have. So I reach out like anyone who connects with me. I'm like, all right, well, now you signed up to get to know me. So
yeah,
you're going to get to know me at least for like 15, 30 minutes, because you just never know. Like you could end up being a guest on our podcast. So
I know. So exciting.
Okay. So I was saying you're the founder of Greater Good Careers. I want to know more about that. What is it? How did it come about? What do you do?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you again for having me. I run a career and leadership coaching business, as you mentioned, Greater Good Careers. And I started that after having worked in law school career services for many years. I've been working at New York Law School for the past 15 years. And before that, I was a public interest lawyer. And I had enjoyed being a public interest lawyer, but what I enjoyed even more was really advising and developing people's careers and running our internship program and pro bono programs. And after some time of working in law school career services, I wanted to find a new modality and a way to work with professionals. And so I got a coaching certification and started this business as a way to work with mid-career professionals and help them figure out what it is they want to do with their careers, how they can develop some confidence around making big transitions, and helping them with things like resume review and mock interviews and, just working through some difficult work situations and figuring out what's next for them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great because, we don't stay in the same job for 40, 50 years.
Right.
And we haven't been doing that for, the last 20 years. And it is really daunting to, as, a person in your 40s, to switch careers and do something completely different. And then, I felt that way when, I left legal aid and I was, only doing criminal defense work, which is just so siloed and specific. And I just felt like, and don't get me wrong, tons of people move into civil work and seamlessly. But for me, it felt very daunting. Like, I don't know anything except criminal law. I don't know anything except the CPL, the criminal procedure law. Like, I don't know anything. And how can I even transition to anything else? It felt really, really scary when I started boundless awareness and I left. And I was like, I mean, And even now, I think like, gosh, I wish I had, some legal experience that was outside of the criminal sector, and I had gained more experience, and I probably would have benefited from talking to somebody like you. But what are the common, fears or insecurities or anxieties that people come to you with, when they're like, all right, I've been in this job for 7 years. I've been in this job for 12 years. I don't know where to go now, or even how to break in to a different sector.
Yeah, exactly what you said. A lot of it is uncertainty about what's possible. So you do the same job. You go to law school and you think this is the only job I want to do. Most people who become public defenders, that's all they've ever thought about. And it's what they do all their internships in, and
Yeah.
they get to work. And, it's great for a while, but then after a while it can become draining. Or you can feel like, is this what life is? That I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing the same thing over and over again? Or you hit frustrations with the system. I imagine when you were a public defender, it was really hard. Just dealing with your clients, getting incarcerated, cycling through the system, not getting the support they needed, and feeling like you want to do something different in a way that's more effective in serving your clients or the community that you want to work in.
That's exactly it.
Yes. And then you also hit the roadblocks of institutions, and nonprofits can be really poorly run. And so a lot of my clients work in places where they don't feel supported, or they have a supervisor who's really difficult, or there's no room for advancement, or they're just stuck and bored with what they're doing. So a lot of different reasons that people come to me. And the biggest challenge for us is figuring out what's next. And then after you've been in a job for so long, say you've been somewhere for 10 years, you haven't been in the job search process for so long, you have no idea where to get started. So that's a lot of what I talk to my clients about too.
Right. How do you stay up to date with all of that? Because I'm sure so much has changed of like how you're supposed to put your heading on your cover letter, like we never thought about, at least I never thought about like, oh, of course I can put my home address on my resume. It feels ridiculous now to think that like I was giving out my home address to people.
Yeah, and that's an equity. It's funny that you mentioned that because that's an equity issue. And a lot of that is always evolving, right? I mean, they don't want people to have bias against people because you put your address on your resume.
Completely. Can you talk a little bit more about that so that everyone knows what you mean?
Yeah, so people can get discriminated against based on where they live. So if you live in a neighborhood that may be low income or, has a reputation for some reason or another, an employer could look at that and be like, oh, I don't want to hire someone from this neighborhood, or it could lead to, oh, that person lives in my neighborhood and I have a bias towards people who live in my neighborhood and they have the same wealth and privilege and, class as I do. So it's like I forget what the exact word is, but, it's like picking someone who has the same background as you.
Yeah, like attracts like. So like, you want to see yourself reflected.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's usually unconscious. Like, of course it can be intentional, but you do think like, well, I'm pretty good.
Yeah, and so I want to work with someone who's exactly like me. Exactly. You had asked about how I stay up to date on these things. A lot of it is just working with job seekers for so long. You see the trends that are changing and things that are new. And then also I go to a lot of conferences. I'm on a lot of listservs. I read a lot in, the news about what's happening for job seekers. For example, like right now, AI is the big topic. So I read a lot about that and how that's impacting the job search and the process. So it's just staying, on top of what those themes are and what's happening.
Yeah. I thought about that in when I was in law school and I would go to my career services center. And, I just think that job is so hard because you have hundreds of students coming to you being like, I don't know what I should do. Or like, I don't know how to get this job. Or, it's on campus interviewing situation. And, it's dependent on your rank at the class. And, if you don't fit that mold, like, then where do you go? How was that experience at New York Law School and counseling and probably consoling students?
Yeah.
Just a tough job. Can you, because I feel like people really don't understand how hard that job is. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Sure. So I think it takes a unique person to really like this work. It's not for everyone. I think some people see it as like, oh, it's an easy job because I'm not practicing as a lawyer anymore, but there are challenges. And first is the number of students that I'm responsible for. So on any given year, I'm responsible for about 300 students and helping them find a job. Second is teaching everything that I know about the job search process and how complicated it is to students, and them actually hearing it and wanting to do all that work, because it can be a hustle, to find a job. We make working really hard in this country, especially if you want to find a job that is, pays well, respects you, is aligned with what you studied and what you want to do. So it can be a complicated process, and it requires you to get out of your comfort zone often. So students are often frustrated with the fact that you had to go and network or talk to people.
Indeed.
Or just put yourself out there in a pretty emotional way. So it can get, it's hard in that way sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so true. And it's so skewed or biased toward the extrovert.
It is.
So, you got to shake hands and rub elbows and then deal with all the other like racism, classism, sexism, the sexual harassment that students have to go through to just meet employers. I think people really underestimate how rampant that is. And then go to the lunches or the public interest fairs, hand out your resume like you're really hawking yourself. I mean, it takes a really extrovert personality it's really hard. I can't believe they make us do that.
Know. And they make you go through so many hoops just to get a job, I mean, it's understandable from the employer perspectives. They want a good person who's going to do a good job, who's going to be a fit for the office, and get along with colleagues and things. But we set that bar really high in order to get these jobs. You might have to go through 4 or 5 rounds of interviews, do a presentation, show your expertise. I don't think it's always been this hard. I think we've made it harder. And we want people who have extreme passion for the work, and it has to be the thing that they've wanted to do their whole lives,
Right.
We make people perform a lot in order to get a job, which can be hard.
Yeah. And then there's kind of this automatic bias for those who are in the top 10% that they must be excellent lawyers because they got, they know how to write, which is important, but that's not what makes a great lawyer. So, okay. So let's get, this podcast is called Everyday Equity. So let's get a little bit more into the equity part. How does it come into your life? Why is it important to you? And what are the applications at greater good careers?
So for me, equity has always been a driving force in terms of wanting to, pursue careers, pursue interests, just think about my political leanings, everything around what is equitable and how to get people what they need. And so where it comes into my work is that my business I called Greater Good Careers because I want to encourage and support people who are in professions or helping professions that are working towards equity, that are, providing opportunities for bettering the communities that people live in. And for me, that's been really important in career because it's so much of where we spend our lives. And it has become a thing in the US where your career is your whole identity. It's everything you are, and it's how you contribute on a day-to-day basis. And so I really want to encourage people to pursue careers where they are serving the greater good, where they are impacting equity and making our world more just, more, I keep saying equitable, but I don't know how else to say it other than I want to support and encourage people who are pursuing careers that impact their communities in positive ways.
Yeah, it's really the antithesis of what is already out there, just this hyper capitalist driven.
Right.
Where's the next, badge that you can sew onto your sash?
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, no, how about we get you into a place that actually is welcoming for you, accessible for you, meaningful for you, and not chase the next golden handcuffs.
Right.
So to speak.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's not that I'm judging people who pursue that. I understand people pursue different careers based on, whatever their interests or their financial situation or their backgrounds. So, but I really align with the people who are choosing career paths that are aligned with their values and their vision for what the world should be. And so that's what drives me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so great because what you do, because it's so hard to find someone who understands how the legal practice works, in real life at law firms or, NGOs, nonprofit organizations, and then can match that with where a person is at. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about you mentioned you were a public interest lawyer. Can you talk a little bit about where you were at, what you were doing, and how, if that impacted your take on equity?
It did. So I became a lawyer and went to law school because I wanted to do public interest law. I think I had a vision for what it would be. I don't know that it ended up being exactly that, but I really wanted to help low-income communities and provide legal assistance, which I thought was a skill that I had developed that I could then utilize to help people in need. And so I did all my internships in housing law. It was an area I kind of fell into it a little bit, but something that really interested me. And so I worked at an organization called Housing Conservation Coordinators after I graduated from law school, which is a very small community organization in Hell's Kitchen.
Yep.
And it's very focused on tenant advocacy and tenant organizing. And it was my first time living in New York City. This was 2005. And it was a unique time in New York City, I think, because we were just at the moment where New York City was going to become like totally unaffordable to most people. I think it already was. But at that point, landlords were really evicting as many people as possible in Hell's Kitchen because it was hot property in Manhattan. And so my clients had lived in New York City for many generations, most of them. And a lot of them were artists in Hell's Kitchen. It's near Broadway. So many of them were in the art space. Others were, just people who had lived for generations in that neighborhood, which had struggled for many years. But now if you go to Hell's Kitchen, it's been totally gentrified at this point. But at the time, there's still a lot of rent stabilized tenants, a lot of tenants who are in rent controlled apartments. And so my job was to represent them when they were facing eviction, either because their landlords were harassing them and trying to get them out of their apartments, they were struggling to pay their rent, or for various reasons, different reasons that they were trying to evict them. So it was challenging. I learned so much about New York City and the many layers of bureaucracy that you have to get through in order to get support and resources in this city.
Yeah.
But I don't think that lawyering was the right path for me necessarily. And so I feel like I've pursued instead like a lawyer adjacent kind of career path after that, running pro bono programs and running the public interest career office at the law school.
Now there's Hudson Yards is near there, right?
Yes.
And
it's so wealthy. Yeah. When I was at HCC, the tenant organizers were fighting the stadium that was going to come to Hudson Yards. There was a big push to build a stadium there for the Olympics to come to New York City. But that didn't happen as a result of community organizers.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you to those organizers. Oh my God. Can you even imagine?
Yes.
Yeah, very grateful. What's so funny about movement work, just on this very specific thing, is that these successes sometimes are about avoiding things, and you don't, because you can't see what was avoided. You can't be people kind of forget, and then you're like, it's hard to be thankful to the movement, to the organizers, to the community who made sure that didn't happen, because you can't see a negative. You can't see that it's not there.
Sure. Now there's Hudson Yards there, but it could have been a massive cluster with a stadium. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, so, oh gosh, you just said something that I was, So, when I talk about in my own workshops, I talk about why I got into legal aid, why I became a public defender. And, I say it was liberty is the most important human right for me. But, when you're talking, there's so many human rights, housing, for example, healthcare, liberty, all of these are human rights, food, welfare, not having your kids taken from you. Housing is such an important human right. So it's such also because it's so difficult and you're fighting the capitalism and the landlords. It's a high burnout position. You have to have similar to being a public defender. It's just really, really hard. So I can see how that, just seeing all that inequity, all the inequality, all the ways that people's homes were valued more than the people who live in it, which is the world we live in, can affect your sense of equity, can really influence it to see the world for actually how it actually works, instead of, I think, maybe these rose-colored glasses that people tend to put on if they're not in like human rights work.
Yeah, I think I was very idealistic when I went to law school, and thinking that, if I represented tenants, I could get justice for them, which I did in many instances, but it's a long game. It's a really long game. And I, f- you know, I feel a little like sad that I didn't stick with it a little bit, because I think I could have gained a lot from continuing to help clients and learning how to be a better advocate. In 2 years, you can't really learn that much. But I just trusted my gut in that moment, and I knew that this was not what I wanted to do for the long term. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad I did it as my first job, and I learned so much. But it felt like civil public defense in some ways. You're defending people's house. It is a human right.
Of course. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I just had it at the top of my head. 1 second. All right. It lost me.
It's okay. It happens to me all the time.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about, growing up and anything like in your childhood or your adolescence that kind of also gave you a sense of equity, or what equity means to you, because to go to law school to become a public interest lawyer, something must have happened before that to influence you to go in that way. So I'm interested to know.
Yeah. So I'm the child of Indian immigrants. They came to the US in the 70s, and because of a friend who was living here already, they ended up in central Pennsylvania, which is a very conservative and religious and white area. So and then we ended up moving to an even smaller town when I was growing up. So originally they were in Harrisburg, and then they moved to a really small town, Waynesboro. And when I tell New Yorkers about where I grew up, it just like blows their mind, because they just can't understand what it's like there. But it was hard being one of like a handful of people of color in a town that's 90% white. And I've been in those spaces where it's, extreme majority white. But I think what compounded it was that it was super religious. It was very evangelical Christian, and it was also conservative. Now it's very much Trump country. My parents are still there. And it was like, I think it really shaped who I am as a person. So I don't think if I had to go back, I don't know that I would change any experience about having lived there. But I don't think I faced like discrimination necessarily, but I think I faced otherness. Like I was treated as like very odd. And, my parents were conservative in their own ways, and traditional. And so they didn't really understand what I was going through. So that was the challenge, of just like adjusting to being one of a few people of color in a town, and also having parents who were wonderful, and supportive, but didn't really understand what I was going through at the same time. So I had an older sister, though, who was very supportive. So it's like, she's my best friend. But yeah, it really defined who I am as a person. And it really made me see inequity and racism at an early age,
Yeah.
It's a pretty racist area too. So that just made me angry, I think, growing up. And going to law school was like a way to channel that anger in some ways.
Yeah. My parents have a similar trajectory. And I also have an older sister who is also my best friend. And I just feel like we're very lucky to have, sisters, and two, like a sisterhood, a sister relationship like that. And it's true, like our parents, there's just no way for them to understand kind of like the in between that we had to grow up in. Neither here nor there, not anything enough. You're not American enough, you're not Indian enough. But, having an older sister who had to experience that before you.
Yeah.
It was such a gift to be the younger sibling.
Totally. It was much harder for her, for sure.
Yeah, much harder and totally different experience. We don't talk, I feel like, enough of like the benefits that younger siblings inherently get just by
Have you seen that
luck.
Hassan Minhaj skit on that? he talks about how he's the older sibling, and he's like, I went to war for you, about his younger sister, and you don't even understand what I've gone through.
I
That's
have
true.
seen that. That's hilarious. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he puts into words what a lot of older siblings must be feeling.
Yeah. All right. Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we got to see a lot of, and we, having been born here and without our parents really understanding what we would be going through, but they
Yeah.
couldn't see the future of like how we would be treated being in majority, and as you said, and I also grew up in this similar area, extreme majority white spaces. They can't like prepare you because they don't know what it's like.
Right.
That they can't tell you like, hey, if you ever feel like you don't really understand your identity, like I want to help you, like understand, this is who you are, and take pride in it
Right.
and all this stuff. And I remember my dad said to me once, because I was having like this identity crisis. I was in like maybe mid teenage years. And he's like, you're so lucky you're both. And I was like, I don't even understand what that means. I feel like I'm neither. I feel the lack of it. And he's looking at me like, you have like, you're so rich in your like what we brought you up with, that you have this American side that, you're like, you're full of riches. And for me, I was like, I'm full of like, what's the opposite of that? Like,
sure. Yeah, I see that. I
yeah.
see that now as an adult. I feel like living in New York City, I totally feel very lucky to have both of those experiences and mindsets. But growing up, it's really challenging. And I was also just like nerdy and, I didn't really fit in. And so it was hard. But I think it gave me strength at the same time, like, and a feeling that I can handle anything, I can handle any person and anything as a result. So I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, I feel a similar gratitude. I do feel the richness of it now. But yeah, as a kid, it's so uncertain.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. So let's say somebody wants to find you. Who is like a very typical client of yours? How do they find you? What are they asking from you? Tell us a little bit about kind of like that intake process, so to speak.
Yeah. So they can find me at greatergoodcareers.com or on LinkedIn, Swathi Parikh. And there's a form that you can fill out on my website, and I'll just get back to you and we can schedule a time for a consultation. I work with a broad range of clients, but primarily they're public interest, public service lawyers, and they're trying to figure out what's next in their career. They've tried maybe to apply for some jobs, but they're kind of struggling, or they're in a situation that they just feel really stuck and they can't get out of. And so I will do an initial consultation. We'll see if it's a good fit. And then we work together to start over 8 sessions where I do an intake session where we really get clear on what it is you want. We create a vision for what your career is and what you want to do next. We work through any challenges that you're facing either in your current role or in the confidence that you have for pursuing this next position. And then I do things like editing resumes, cover letters, preparing for interviews, and just being a sounding board and a cheerleader throughout the process. It can be a pretty emotional process to search for a job. And so a lot of what I do is really listening, being supportive, being empathetic. And I think by processing out loud what someone is going through, they really see benefits from coaching. I think so. The idea behind coaching is that I'm not meant to give advice. It's the clients that are coming to me and they are figuring out what they need, but I'm a guide and a support system throughout. But I do give some advice because I have a background in career advising. So I use that expertise and that knowledge of the legal services and government world to advise people and help them find the next position. And often I use my network to introduce them to people as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Your career and leadership coaching program, can you talk a little bit about that?
So that is essentially what I talked about. So it is these 8 sessions and where we work through, I'm sorry, maybe we should cut this part out because I don't, I think I'm just repeating myself.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I got
okay.
it.
No,
I got
was there anything, maybe is there something that you wanted to focus on that I didn't focus on?
Let's see. let's talk about negotiating offers. Can you talk about
Sure.
that part of the coaching program? So let me ask you that question.
Okay. You want to ask him that? Yes.
So, okay. So let's say, so someone comes to you, they get into your career and leadership coaching program where you help them find, what they're looking for, help them network, resume, cover letter, interviews. Now it's time they get the job offer. Like, is your part over, or do you continue do you continue helping them throughout that process?
I do help them throughout that process. So I am very hands-on with my clients, and I really guide them through all of these processes. So I suggest taking a measured approach when dealing with an offer. So not to immediately accept, and to really think through about whether or not this is what you want, first of all, and then think about how you can negotiate the best offer. So I think a lot of public interest lawyers are used to not getting paid very well. So, for example, I was just working with a client who's interviewing for an executive director role at a nonprofit. And the recruiter asked her, "How much do you want to make?" And she was like, "Oh, I don't know, whatever you offer, I'll be fine with it." And I was like, "No, don't say that. You have to negotiate, and you got to play you have to pretend you're the boss in that situation, right?" And so you play a part when you are negotiating an offer. So if they say, "What kind of salary do you want to make?" In New York, there's salary transparency. So they had to post it on the listing anyway. And so you could say, "Well, I saw what the range is. Might be curious to see what you can offer outside of that, or within that range, or outside of that range." And then they'll be like, "Well, we need a number from you." And then you could say, "I'm flexible, and I really want to hear what you're able to offer. I want to go through the interview process first, see what's expected of me in this role. And then if we get to that point, I'd really love to hear, again, what's possible for the organization, and then we can negotiate from there."
Ooh la la. I did not expect that. Okay. Yeah. It's like hard to get. Like, no.
You do. Yeah.
Thanks for asking twice, but no, you're not going to get a number from me.
Yeah.
That's so hard for public interest lawyers. You're right. I mean, because you're like, heck, anything.
Yeah. Just give me whatever you can. I mean, most of the time there's a range, and they're going to pay you something in that range, but you want to try and get to the top of the range.
Yeah.
Because you deserve it. And if you can think about all the things that you are bringing to the table and what you offer and how you're going to transform this particular role, or how you have a vision for the work that you're going to be doing, then absolutely ask for the high number.
Yeah. Right. Gosh. Okay. So I love that example, because that happens even before you go through that whole process. I mean, this is a recruiter who's working on behalf of the employer.
Right.
They're not working for you.
Right.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, recruiters are very personable and could be like, "You'd be a great fit." And they try to kind of create this liaison or relationship that, you feel like maybe I can trust this person and say like, "All right, I hope I'm making, like $70,000 a year." And they're like, "Great. That sounds perfect."
Yeah.
That sounds, you can't get caught in that trap of being like, of saying what your number is.
Exactly. And the whole thing with not accepting on the spot is that, again, you do want to play a little bit hard to get. I mean, you want to be gracious, and you want to thank them for the offer and say, "Thanks so much. I really am grateful for this. I'd like some time to think," and then you come back to them with questions around the salary and negotiating at that point.
Yeah. So that's something you practice with your clients, because I can imagine the rush of happiness you would get after maybe a drought of not getting interviewed, and then you finally get interviewed, you finally get this job offer, and your emotions can get the best of you.
They can. Yeah, definitely. But I think you should always ask for more money. There is no harm in asking for more money. They could say no.
Yeah.
But a reasonable amount, $10,000 more than whatever they're offering, I think is reasonable.
Yeah. And if you don't ask, it's already a no.
Yes, exactly. And they think if you don't ask that you're fine with whatever they're going to give you. So
yeah,
expressing what your value is.
Yeah. This is so great. I want to end today by asking you, if you could give a little tip or tool to our audience members who are listening to this conversation and maybe thinking about equity in such a different way, like as you have positioned it in seeking out a job, in job descriptions, and how interviews can go into biases throughout all of that, like not putting your address on the resumes. If you could give a tip for someone who's kind of just entering this conversation of like, oh, I want to think a little bit more about equity, but I'm not sure where to start. What's something you can offer to guide someone just getting into this?
So I think being aware of, well, first of all, what equity is and doing a lot of reading, reading the news, being up to date on the current issues, both nationally in the world and in your community is a great start. And then think about how you want to contribute specifically. So each of us has a role to play. If we want to live in an equitable world, in an equitable community, we have to be responsible ourselves. So I think thinking about how your specific gifts and talents can play well to serving your community, serving the world that you live in, I think is a great first place to start.
Yeah, love that. Love that. Swathi, it's been great to have you on today. I've learned so much, even in industry that I'm not really involved in the job seeking and career coaching, but I have learned so much from you already. So thank you so much. Greatergoodcareers.com. Find Swathi on LinkedIn, and we'll put all of your links in our show notes. It's been really great talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Pooja. This has been great.
Thanks for joining us on Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change. If today's conversation inspired you, keep the momentum going. Connect with us on LinkedIn at Boundless Awareness, subscribe to our YouTube at Boundless Awareness, and explore more free resources to support your anti-oppression journey at boundlessawareness.com. Remember, progress isn't about perfection. It's about showing up every day with curiosity, compassion, and the courage to do a little better. I'm Pooja Kothari, and I can't wait to keep learning and growing with you right here on Everyday Equity.